Hello again. So last time I did a video, which was, well, for you maybe a while ago, but for me it was 6 minutes ago. We started setting up mixing desk, started setting up the X32, looking at what kind of things we can come across when we come to a mixing desk that somebody else might have used. So, and hence how to set up the mixing desk initially so that we can hear things, so that if we've plugged something into channel 4, then we'll actually be able to control it on channel 4. Okay? So, we're now going to look at the actual individual channels, so literally what on earth all the settings do. Okay? Now, obviously, I'm on my app again. I'll just bring up the picture of the X32 there again. I'm on the app again on the PC, and I'll just talk you through some things. Now, one important thing is view. Okay, is view. Now, I'm just going to quickly find just across here a picture of the kind of controls where you press the view. There's some really little square buttons, and they are very, very important because on them it says view. So some of these settings all have their own kind of setups. Okay, let me just try and find a decent picture of an X32 here. They all have their own individual kind of channel banks. So gate and kind of stuff like that and compression and things are going to be in their own little section. On here, they're all in one screen, but you'll need to go to each individual bit on the X32. And the way you get to that screen is by pressing the view button. Okay. So yeah, it's just make sure that you're kind of pressing the right things. If I quickly just press on that. So if I just quickly show you. On your X32, it's this bit up here. Okay, that's your kind of settings. Now, those settings apply to any channel. So when you press select on a channel, that therefore applies to any of those. Okay, actually, that's not the X32 we have. That's the compact. 1 second. Just let me get through to a picture of the big X32 because that will be useful because there's actually a number of different types of X32s. There's the big size one, there's then another one called compact, there's a kind of producer, I think, and so the different size, and hence they have the different sizes more than anything. There's even one called rack, which is teeny tiny and fits into a rack mount. Let me just bob in. Yes, that should be fine. Yes, let's have that one. Okay, so I will just quickly get rid of that photograph and bring in a different one, which looks like it's absolutely huge. But that's good, I can zoom into it. Now, here we go, X32. So if I zoom in here, you'll see that this is the X32 as you kind of see it. Okay, there's your little scribble strip things we talked about last lesson. Okay, and when we select a track, okay, so that's channel 1, we've selected channel 1. We then up here have gain, okay, then we have what says frequency, okay, then gate, we have the gain control, we have dynamics, okay, we have the equalizer, and then across from there we have bus sends, okay, so that's how much we send to various things, okay, and then we have actually the main mix bus, so how much are we sending through the main, you know, and hence are we sending it to the left speaker or the right speaker or equally to both. So we'll talk about these today. Okay, so on the X32, that's where they are. It's basically that bank of kind of controllers above. All right, obviously knowing that your settings are kind of down here, so obviously my X32 app is kind of very similar to what you'll see, but not exactly the same. Okay, so when we go onto home, you'll see that your X32 screen is basically kind of what you'll see on my app. So you just need to make sure you click on the things. And view the little things there, that's the little square view button. If you press view, it takes you to the individual kind of screen for that setting. So dynamics, when we get into compression, which we'll get into, which is a really good thing on this mixing desk, helps us kind of with vocals and things, and well, all sorts of stuff. If you want to get into the settings on that, you can actually press view, and it takes you to a specific screen on here when you can set all the stuff up. Okay, so again, it's a great mixing desk. We're lucky to have it. But hence this is what you'll see on your screen. Okay, so you just need to make sure you keep on going to the kind of the view sections. The home basically shows you all the overall global kind of setup. Okay, and each individual bit then, okay, can be seen from home. So if we go into the in section, okay, that's the kind of config section. Now, initially, I'm going to go into channel 9 because actually this will make it because the only thing that's got plugged in at the moment is channel 9. If I go into config on channel 9, you'll see here the plus 48V. Now, there's two types of microphones: dynamic and condenser. If you plug in a condenser microphone, or a capacitor microphone, as I suppose the probably proper term is, if you plug that in, it needs power. Okay, and you'll get into the whys and why this is the case. If you plug in a normal vocal microphone, it doesn't need power. Okay, so if 48V is not turned on, this microphone I'm currently speaking through would not work. Okay, so 48V is what's called phantom power. So basically, when you plug a microphone in, it needs to give it a little bit of power in order to get the signal through. Okay. If it was a dynamic microphone, so one of our kind of vocal handheld microphones, they don't require power because the way they pick up sound is slightly different. Hence, they don't need power. But this one does. So if 48V is on, you officially you can damage a normal vocal microphone that doesn't need phantom power by sending it phantom power. I have to say that I've never actually had a microphone break or do anything particularly bad if phantom power is left turned on. And hence the microphone you plug in doesn't need phantom power. Rarely do I find that anything bad happens. So yeah, so again, it's nice to turn it off if you don't need it, okay, but if you do leave it turned on, I've not found it make a massive issue before. You'll see at the moment this is the signal we're getting through. Now the green is obviously good. If you get into what's called clip, that's when it gets distorted. That's when you sound like a kind of a bad DJ in a club, where you can it's all distorted and you can't really understand what they're saying because it's all distorted and too loud. The bit here, gain is how sensitive the microphone is. It's not quite the same as volume. Okay, I could turn the volume down of this. Okay, I could turn the volume down of that, but actually put the gain up. But the gain is how sensitive the microphone is. If I turn this up, I'll begin to go into the yellow. And if I go slightly closer, I can begin to go into the yellow. And if I get past a certain point, it gets very loud. So not enough gain means you can't hear things. Too much gain means that it gets all kind of like boomy and you'll get feedback. The idea of gain is that you want, generally, if you had those four channels, you'd want to set the gain so that the actual overall volume coming through your main speakers the volumes actually look like that. Okay, so hence the gain of your guitar might need to be, say, for example, like 29.5. The gain of the keyboard might need to be 13. Okay, because if it's plugged in straight to the PA system, it might be quite a kind of what's called a hot signal. The drums might be kind of like 20.5, and the vocals might be more at like 39. The way you'd set the gain up is that is to get a good signal out of what it is you're putting in, and then to get to the point where actually all of those actually at the same level of volume. If you don't do this, if say for example your gain was all set exactly the same, say that all of these were set to 20, okay? If they were all set to 20, the problem is that to get the sound balanced, okay, because that looks nice and balanced, but at this point the vocals will be far too quiet because it needs to be on gain 40. So the vocals, you turn them all the way up to maximum. The keyboards would be far too loud, so you turn them all the way kind of down to there. Okay, the guitar again would be kind of there, and the drums kind of would be there. So at that point, then it's quite a messy setup. If you wanted to turn the vocals up, you physically can't turn them up because they're already turned up to the maximum. Okay, but then it may be that you need more of the vocals. But then what you end up having to do is actually then turning down the drums, turning down the keyboard, turning down the guitar, and then turning up the mains. And that's very slow, because then actually everything goes down in volume. It just doesn't. It's not a great way of working it. So what you want to do, and also the other issue is that keyboard, hence that amount of volume, that you move the keyboard a little bit, okay, is going to have if it's actually quite a hot signal, it's going to make more of a difference. You move that by like half a centimeter, it's going to make a lot more difference than if you may move that by half a centimeter, because that is a quieter signal overall. So you want to get your gain set up so that when you get everything kind of relatively around 0, the amount of sound coming through from each of them is balanced. So at 0, it's as balanced as it can be, because then if you say, oh, I need a little bit more vocal, you just put a little bit more vocal, or the keyboards are a little bit too loud. Okay, and hence you've got more control, and it's easier to do the mixing. Okay, so that's the idea of gain, is that we therefore make things as balanced as we can at 0. Okay, that's the idea of doing sound checks and stuff like that, is that therefore it becomes easy. If everything basically is the same level at 0, if you want more vocals, you just give a little bit more vocals. If you want less guitar, you just take the guitar down a little bit, rather than taking the guitar down and then some of the things up and then fiddling with the main PA, and just it gets problematic. Okay, so gain is how sensitive, how much of that signal we're getting, and again, different inputs will require different amounts of gain. Okay, generally keyboards are pretty loud when you plug them in through what's called a DI box. So you know, hence you'll get quite a big sound. Sometimes they'll only be on like plus 12 or something, but a vocal microphone, sometimes you do need to be like plus 40, especially if it's a dynamic vocal microphone, depending on the type of vocal microphone. Okay, this is all stuff you'll play around with. All right. But yeah. Yes. So that's that. Now, low cut. Okay, low cut. Now, low cut, if you, for example, have a singer, okay, and you work out that your singer, I can sing relatively low, but really, and I'll do this possibly with EQ, maybe this has a section of EQ. I'm not sure if you actually can physically see this. I don't think you can. Okay, I won't do that. If we did have some kind of live spectral kind of stuff to see the kind of frequencies I sing, you'd kind of slightly see this. But a low cut is that a singer can't sing below a certain point. Just go out to config. So if you were to turn low cut on, it basically means that no frequencies below, at this point 75 hertz, actually get picked up. Okay, now if I was to move this, what it means is it cuts out all the kind of sounds. So if I turn it up as much as it will go, yeah, that means that 400 hertz, that means that it cuts off a lot of the sound. The only reason you might want to do that is you kind of don't get boomy sound in your vocal mic, okay? Or for example, an acoustic guitar, you might sometimes set up, because acoustic guitar sometimes has a low like a feedback that you get, like a feedback. If you actually set a low cut up, you can actually avoid that feedback happening. Okay, sometimes you want to use it. If you, for example, a bass guitar, you do not want to have a low cut, because a bass guitar is low. So the idea is you wouldn't want to put a low cut on a bass guitar. All right, but a low cut is basically if you want to put a cut and not pick up the lowest of the sounds. Okay, and you kind of have a control about where that cutoff is. So if you've got a vocalist, a female vocalist, you might set it, about 150, which means she can't sing lower than that. So it means that any sounds that are lower than that aren't her, and hence you don't want them. Yeah. So if, for example, a bass guitar was quite close, you wouldn't want the bass guitar kind of the bass amp coming through her microphone. So you'd set a low cut up, okay, or any other kind of sounds going through there. You know that she has a general kind of voice. On Cubase and on the actual physical mixing desk, they actually, if you sing, it'll tell you what frequency you are. So if you got your singer to sing their lowest possible note, and then you know that's at like 150 hertz or something, then you can set at that point, and you know that's as low as they'll go, and set a low cut. Okay, it just allows you more kind of headroom for other sounds. So if for example you had a bass guitar, you wouldn't want loads of stuff going through one microphone, just muddy sounds going through one microphone. You just want the one that is bass doing the bass sounds, and the vocal doesn't have those bass sounds in, so then it kind of should blend a bit better. Source, don't worry, leave that be. That basically means that says in 4, so that channel 4 is in 4. Okay, so just leave that wants to stay what it is. If you start changing it, then it's problematic. Okay, so that means you've just changed channel 4 to be actually the input of channel 5, and then that gets very complicated. That's the kind of things that take me a long time to work out what's going wrong, because someone's accidentally changed these things. Delay you don't need to necessarily worry about. This is mainly if, for example, let me try and think. Say we had 2 PA speakers 100 meters apart from each other. Okay, sometimes you'd want the sound from the PA speaker 100 meters away to reach you at the same time the sound came out of the PA speaker that was next to you. So you'd set up a delay. Okay, you set up a delay, but I've not used it much on this. I wouldn't worry about that too much. So really, gain is all you need to do on config. It's gain and possibly low cut. Link is if you have a stereo microphone, but generally you're not going to be doing much of that. So if link is turned on, and hence you might want to actually turn it off, because sometimes it means that if you turn link on, if I turn link on channel 1 and said okay, these controls, you see they both turn red, and if I move the volume of one, the other one follows. Okay, so they're linked together. Okay, which could be what you want if you've got a stereo microphone, but it might not be. If you accidentally link it, note that now that picture, that scribble script picture has changed, because it basically is whatever is that one. So you'd have to go back in, change it back to green, and then go back, and that was keyboard, wasn't it? So go back, get the keyboard, call it keyboard, go into there, and then you're back again. Okay, so link is very useful, especially if you've got a stereo microphone or something, and but for the moment, don't start linking things together, because again, sometimes you'll do that and think, oh, they're both moving at the same time, and that's negative. Insert. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so we are going to start looking at inserts at some point, effects and things. Okay, now gate. Now we're not going to look at gate at the moment. Okay, we're going to actually go to dynamics, because gate. The idea of a gate is, if you imagine a garden gate, if you got a spring. Okay, you're setting a spring on a garden gate. If you have a really tight spring, you need to push on that gate really hard to open it. Now you need to imagine that the gate is exactly the same with sound. The sound has to be really loud. If you set this gate up to be its threshold, okay, here, to be really kind of high, and I'll actually go into channel 9 here and actually turn this on. If I set this to be really high, at certain points it will get rid of. Ooh, you see there? It got rid of my voice because my voice wasn't loud enough. Okay, so every time I stop speaking here, for example, the gain gets rid of the sound. So you see that actually muted the sound, just because some background sounds. And it can be a very useful thing, especially for drums. Gates are used a lot in drums, because you want to cut the sound when it goes off a certain amount, especially if if you've got a snare drum, you don't want the sound of the hi-hat always going through the snare drum mic, so hence you set a gate to stop the sound getting through. So just like a garden gate is how strong the spring is, how much sound, how loud the sound has to be to get it through. If you set it badly, then you have to end up actually really talking really loud to get through it. Now I'm going to talk like this, and I have to talk louder and louder to try and get it to come through, and at this point I have to shout, because so you get the idea. If you set it wrong, you can hear nothing. It basically mutes your track. Okay, so gate is a useful thing, but we're not going to use it for the moment. Okay, so just make sure it's not active. You can change what these things are, expanders and gates and duckers and stuff like that, but don't fret too much. Dynamics, however, compression is something we're going to look at now. So say we've got a vocalist, which we will have, and say that the beginning of the song is quite quiet, okay, but then later on in the song it's quite loud. you're going to need to have the gain set at an amount, so let's say 32.5, but at some point that might end up getting too loud, because at the beginning they're like, oh, kind of husky and kind of quiet, and you want to be able to hear them, and then suddenly, bang, they hit a chorus and it gets really loud. Now, you could turn down their microphone on the mixing desk, but then you're doing what's called riding the faders, and you're like, oh god, and then you end up basically turning it up and down constantly and trying to second guess when they're going to sing loud, which is fine if you know the song really well, but if you've not really heard it before, you're going to be turning them down, and possibly they might get quiet really quickly, and then you have to suddenly turn the mixing desk back up again. You don't want to do that. What compression does is it sound past a certain point. Okay, so that's literally normal sound. So that's sound input and sound output. Okay, a normal graph. So that's where the compression turned off. What compression does is it squishes the loud sound and makes it quieter to a ratio. So if I turned on and I said anything that was, you see here, threshold 13.5, that means anytime I get, if we set that to 12, because obviously you can see 12, that means anytime I get to 12, okay, which is a lot louder than I am at the moment, it will start squishing down that. So for every, for example, 10 decibels, okay, actually, it won't go up by 10 decibels. It'll be cut down by a ratio of whatever you decide. So if it was cut down ratio by 2, instead of being 10 decibels higher, it would only be 5. So these sounds at the bottom would still be just as loud, but the loudest sounds at the top would now be they will be louder, but not by as much. Okay, so if I was to set up this ratio of 2.5, let's say 3, okay, anything above that 12 decibels will be louder, but only by a third as much, ratio of 3. So if I was to suddenly sing a loud note, and I'm going to do this in a second, so you might want to turn your headphone volume down. The idea though is that you shouldn't have to. If I set this properly, it shouldn't be actually that much louder. Okay, so if I was to go like this, okay, so I was singing pretty loud by the end, and you see that little thing was then compressing that sound. It was stopping the volume from going too much. If I do exactly the same thing but turn the compression off, watch how loud it gets. And we're clipping. Okay, so I did exactly the same. In fact, probably then I wasn't even singing as loud as previous. What this does is it means that you're not going to get clipping and that horrible distorted sound, and you're going to be able to keep control of a vocalist. Again, a vocalist who therefore maybe sometimes is really quiet, but when they sing, they're really loud as well. Okay, so if I turn that on and I thought, right, I've got a singer who really is really loud, really loud. Okay, if I set that a certain thing, so I set that to, let's say, 18. Okay, anytime I go over 18, it's going to compress me at a ratio of 4, which is quite a big ratio. And you'll notice that if I sing loud now, it's not going to get particularly loud through the mix. So it doesn't get anywhere near clipping. You're kind of going to -6 dB, but you don't get close to that clipping level, which means that, if you do this too much, however, and I'll show you, so if you end up setting it like as a ratio of 7 and the threshold is too much, what it means is, and you see there, suddenly the voice just can't get through. It's set to 34.5, which constantly makes it sound like it's cutting me in and out and in and out. So compression could, one second, that was really annoying. If you set compression wrong, the idea is you need to find out how loud they get and just put compression on the top end of their volume. Yeah, if you set the threshold too low when they're normally talking or their normal singing voice, it sets it and it just doesn't work very well. So what it does, it keeps on getting rid of the sound. And if you set a big ratio, it means that suddenly it just cuts loads of sound out. Okay, and that is really not great. So it is a very, very useful thing. Okay, if you're doing live sound, I would say it is vital that you use it. Absolutely vital. if you've got singers in a gig, you stick some compression on, possibly even on your guitars, possibly on quite a lot of stuff. Drums really do well with compression, because it means they can't. If your drummer during a sound check, and I'm saying about drummers because this generally happens, if your drummer during a sound check plays the drums during the sound check relatively not as loud as they usually would. You want them to always play as loud as they do during a set, but during a gig, if it's a rock band, the drummer usually ends up hitting the drums a lot harder during the show. Okay, now you could, and if you've got that drum kit mixed up completely, as in like lots of microphones on it, you'll have to end up turning all of them down. Okay, if you set up some compression, it means that even if they do hit louder, okay, it's not much louder through the mix. So it means if they suddenly start hitting it twice as loud, okay, or 50% as hard, you only get 25% as hard on a ratio of 2. But if you set it up to be a ratio of 5, then if they play like 50% as hard, that's divided by 5, so it only get 10% more volume, which means actually that they can hit the drums as hard as they like. They're not going to still make it louder than is balanced. So it means you have to do less work while you're mixing. Okay, you have to do less work you're mixing, and that means if you in a sound check get all these things set up correctly, you should literally, and this is why some people think sound engineers don't do much. If you're sitting there not doing much on the sound desk, people think, oh, they don't do much, it's easy, that sound job, you just sit there and just watch bands. But where the work comes in for a sound engineer is during a sound check, during the setup. If you get the settings good, you shouldn't need to be constantly changing things on the mixing desk. You should just be able to sit there and listen, and then little things, little tweaks, little other bits to make it sound even better. If you're constantly trying to turn the snare drum down because you haven't got a compression on it, and you constantly have to turn that down, and the vocals are constantly getting too loud, and you're turning them down, turn them up, you're not going to have enough hands. Yeah, people then think, oh, the sound engineer was working hard tonight. The only reason you were working hard is because you hadn't actually set everything up correctly, because you hadn't done it properly. Okay, so sometimes looking busy is not a great sound engineering job. Okay, if you're looking busy, it means things are going wrong. If they're constantly changing things and whatever, things are going wrong. You want to actually just sit there as a sound engineer and listen to the music and just try and make it sound better, rather than trying to fight fires. Compression is one way that you can do that. So therefore you set a compression up. Generally I like, on a vocalist, between 2 and 3. Okay, I set myself, when I record myself, at 2.5, and generally because I'm relatively loud, again, a threshold of 16 is probably about right, but maybe even kind of up to about 12. Okay, so you get a nice natural sound until I get into my really kind of loud range, and then it just gives it a little bit of a squish so it doesn't cook through too much in the mix. Okay, so I'm kind of like singing and oh yeah, and it's like, yeah, and it's then louder, but it wasn't as loud as it would have been if I didn't have compression on. It would then clip and get all horrible and distorted. Okay, that's compression. When you do sound checks, you want to set the compression, and that is when you need to make sure the person who's singing sings as loud as they are going to during the performance, so you can set the compression properly. Okay. Don't worry about the knee thing at the moment. We'll go into that another time. Okie dokie. 1 second. So, awesome. So, we've got that bit now. Now, EQ. Okay, EQ. Now, EQ stands for equalizer. Okay, and that is all the frequencies from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. Now, EQ means that if you can therefore increase a certain frequency in that input. Okay, so if it's my voice, okay, now if you have a low cut on, you've turned one on, you see what happens there. That's what low cut means, which means after 75 hertz, it basically cuts the sound out, because I don't sing lower than that. Okay, I don't. Okay, if I then have these other ones, okay, I'm just going to quickly get these all to like 0. Number 2 can be 0 as well. How do we get number 2? Could be 0. I'm going to start on 0 just because it's easier to show you at that point if it's on 0. The idea of this is sometimes it's to get rid of feedback. Okay, sometimes in a concert, in a gig, you might have some feedback, and it might be if it's in hall, if it's because it's echoey, it might be that there's a certain kind of frequency that you need to basically cut out to get rid of some feedback. But it might be that in a certain area of my voice you want to accentuate. It might be that my voice through the microphone sounds a little bit muddy. Yeah, it sounds a little bit kind of basic, and you want to give a little bit of additional kind of, sparkle, so to speak. Now with that, 1 second, let's get to 0. If this is how you come to your EQ, 1 second, yeah, there we go. So if I imagine that number 3 here, high mid, so in my kind of slightly higher vocal area, and you can change the frequency of this, okay, so it depends what singer you've got. If in my higher kind of area, frequency area, you want to give it a little bit of additional push, okay, I can give a bit of an additional push. Now I'm going to turn EQ on here, and you want to give it a bit of additional push at that point. You can actually, and Q makes that fatter, okay, so you can see that, and actually you can hear the difference that this makes. If I turn up the gain quite a lot and I move this frequency, you can see that that's all the frequencies it's looking at. You can hear that? Now at that point I sound slightly odd because I'm accentuating a certain frequency. That's 400 hertz. And then if I move that up, you can see that there it's accentuated. It's making me actually have a higher, kind of a slightly thinner sounding voice than I actually do. Hopefully this is coming through on the video. Hopefully it will come through on the video. But through my head, that's odd. Through the headphones, now this sounds really odd. Okay, and if you change that kind of quickly, it sounds really weird. Yeah. Now you don't want to be doing 15 decibel push-ups on things like that. What you do want to do is, if you, for example, want to give a little bit of a push at, say, 650, or you want to kind of give a little bit of additional bass. If your guitar's sounding not particularly bassy, you might want to give a little bit of additional frequency. Okay, the low cut's turned on because I don't sing any kind of lower than that. If you go into kind of number 2, it might be that actually you want to get rid of some bass frequency. Okay, just click on that. It might say, okay, my singer gets quite boomy at like 200 hertz. So you might want to just get rid of a little bit, okay, around that general area. Now Q, if you have a Q of 10, it means that it gets rid of that frequency. It's very tight. Okay, it's very tight on that. Now you see that it's getting rid of a frequency and not much around it. If you increase the Q, basically the height of the hill is it's squished out. So if I increase that Q, it gets rid of more of those frequencies, but more gradually. So if you have a general issue with the sound, your Q wants to be slightly lower. If you want a big Q, that means that's kind of getting rid of feedback. Okay, if you have it at 10, often that's because you want to get rid of feedback. Say that my bass, my sound thing is having an issue at 220 hertz. Last gig I did have an issue at 220 hertz. It was feeding back, and it was that frequency when I turned the mixing desk up. When nothing else was playing, that would be the frequency that was feeding back. So I got rid of 15 dB at that point. Okay, and then at that point, it didn't feed back. And I could actually make the main mixers louder. The overall main PA was louder, but I just got rid of that frequency. But only that frequency. Okay, that's when we get into resonant frequencies and things, and we don't need to worry about it too much at the moment, but you will eventually get into that. So EQ is a basic way of modeling the sound to make it better, to make it more like the sound you want. Now, sometimes, again, it's subtle little bits. It's better, in my opinion, to actually take away, okay, a frequency you don't want, rather than constantly pulling in ones that you do. If you take away a little bit of kind of that mid frequency there, okay, you can take away some stuff. And again, there's different types. So if we have a look at this, if we set a different type, that's called a high shelf. What that means is that everything past a certain point, it's like the opposite of cut. And if I turn that up, you'll hear that there's lots of top end. Yeah, this is like a cheap microphone. Lots and lots of top end and quite hissy. Yeah, but sometimes just a little bit. So if you look at that, I've taken away a little bit of that and just a little bit of high end. If I was to turn that that one kind of completely off, 1 second. If I was to not do that, 1 second, here we go. So that little high shelf just gives a little bit of additional kind of ping at the top. I've still got rid of the little kind of muddy bit there, but I've not given much, just a little bit. Okay, if I get rid of that, you'll note that it's fine. It still sounds okay, but just that little bit is there. Now, you might want to do that with a sound, you might not. But again, you can potentially get rid of sounds. So at that point, I'm very in a bassy area, okay, because I've got rid of all those high sounds, okay? So EQ is subtle. You never want to be doing too much. The only thing that ends up being harsh is low cut, okay? But everything else should be relatively subtle unless you're getting rid of feedback. So you're never wanting to be putting minus 15 dB on anything, really. But yeah, so there's cuts, there's shelves. So that's a high cut, and you'll hear there that's like very odd. There's shelves, and there's different types of EQs. Now we can look into that kind of stuff, but usually, okay, PEQ, okay, that's parametric EQ, is what you want. Okay, so I'm just going to turn that down. Now, you can set up your EQ and stuff. If it doesn't for whatever reason work, you can turn it off. Okay, and you can turn low cut off, and that is just my normal sound. And then when you turn it on, you should then notice a little bit of a difference. So that's off, la 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 la, and then you turn it on, and you get rid of a certain frequency. Now it's subtle. It should be subtle. It shouldn't be ridiculously different when you turn EQ on and off. But if it's turned on, remember that someone else's settings might be very different than yours. Okay, they might be very different than yours. So you want to check what settings they've got. Again, always start from nothing at all and then subtly add little bits to make something sound better or to potentially get rid of feedback. If you're getting rid of feedback, often it may be actually that the main EQ is the one you want to do it on. You'll see there that I've done 116 and 232 hertz were where I was getting feedback. So I've rolled off at that point to try and get rid of some feedback, but to keep the volume high. So often if you're going to do feedback EQ, you do it on your overall main output, okay, rather than individual. Otherwise, every single track you do is going to have to be, you're going to have to do it on every single track, or you can just do it on one. So that's EQ. Okay, EQ's there. Now for the moment, I'm going to turn EQ off, low cut off, and then we'll go from there. Sends. Sends is, at the moment, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 ascending. Okay, because previously we decided that we wanted my channel 9 to go through to 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's why it's been sent to 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll notice that there's 8 that are like lit up boxes, well, not lit up but grey, and there's 8 that are darker. Okay, this is basically down to whether they are effects, okay, or whether they are just like mix bus. So this is our foldback monitors. Okay, that's our foldback monitors, and that's what we're sending. However, we want to see 13 and 14. I've got a send here, okay, and that's sending to 13 and 14. Okay, 13 and 14. They're getting something. But what is 13 and 14? So send 13 and 14. It isn't channel 13, 14. It's send 13, 14. If I go into bus master, you'll see that if the bus is there, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, but then 13, 14 is here. And if I click on that, that says FX1. So this is effects. Okay, and if I type in, go into effects here, FX1 is a reverb. Okay, that means that I'm sending, okay, channels, I'm sending signal to FX. Now you're not hearing any reverb at the moment because I've not turned the reverb up. Okay, if I was to turn the reverb up, I'd just turn up FX1 and FX2. It's now receiving a signal. You still can't hear it. Why? Well, because I've not turned up it through my main mixer. Okay, so 1 second, let me find that. So you'll see here, auxiliary FX return, you'll see that I've not turned up these ones here. Okay, Ooh. If I do, I sound like I'm in a hall. At least it should do through the through the video. I'm assuming it's getting this. Boop. Yes, it does. Now, I'll just turn that down a touch. That means that you can give an echoey sound to any of your channels. At the moment, I'm on channel 9, and I'm sending to bus 1314, and bus 1314 is my hall reverb. Okay? Now I can set up a bigger decay, and that makes it like a bigger space. Okay? So I can actually set that up. So it means that if I've got a singer and I've got like a ballad and I want to have like a little bit of kind of reverb there, I can set an individual amount of reverb for one channel, okay, or every channel, or the overall mix. Okay, so if I go back into this FX1, now in home, and if you press an effects, you'll see this, you see that there's lots of different effects. Okay, for the moment I'm on 1314 is hall reverb, which is on FX2, which is the one I've got at the moment. When you go into FX return, you'll see that FX2 is receiving the signal, and I can give different amounts of that. That's probably too much reverb, I imagine. When you go into bus master, you need to have that turned on. So FX1, FX2, you need to have them turned up as well. Okay, so sometimes you'll think you've turned effects on, but nothing will come through because both of them need to be turned on in different amounts. Okay, so yeah, that's effects. Now, effects are useful, but again, we're talking subtlety. If I've got a song and it's kind of like a ballad, and I end it, and it's kind of like, you know, oh, that's lovely. But if it's a song that doesn't need reverb, don't have it. If it's a song that does, do have it. Be aware that if you add it to a vocal, but you don't add it to a guitar, then the guitar's it's gonna sound odd. So you want to add possibly less to a guitar because guitar's playing chords, and hence sometimes if you have lots of reverb on a guitar part, you actually can't hear the chords. Everything just keeps on kind of reverbing. It just ends up sounding too echoey. But yeah, so that's reverb. So when you get into sends, that's what it means when we get into sends. Okay, so if I click on channel 9 and go into sends, I can either physically set the sends there. For you, actually, your sends, you've actually got the ability, your sends, I'll just get the picture. Let's just view that one. Yeah. Now for you, if I just quickly zoom in to this area here, if I can just zoom, you can set your sends there. Okay, so the button there is 1 to 4, and then etc, etc. So 13 to 16 are down there. If you press that and then press view, it gives you the view you've just had, and you can set the sends there. Okay, now the sends on fader thing I showed you is basically shows up exactly there. So if I just click off that, if I go back into sends on fader, so I go to bus 18 and I've set up our foldback monitor from previously, and I go sends on fader, literally that's my sends on this channel. Okay, if I actually on that channel, okay, go into channel 1, you'll see that that's how much is being sent through in channel 1. So that amount to bus 1, that amount to 2, that amount to 3, that amount to 4. Okay, and I can change that. I can therefore get rid on sends on fader. Okay, and you'll notice that that's going down. Okay, so yeah, the amount I send to that is going down. All right, now so you can do it on sends on fader, or you can just do it in here. But again, if you're setting up foldback mixes, it's easier to do sends on fader because it's quicker and it's a bit more easy. It's a bit easier in my opinion. If you are, for example, doing sends to FX, then in the sends area, that's kind of where you want to go. Again, using that kind of dial on the actual mixer is a very useful thing to do. So that's our effects. When you go into main, this is more important than you'd imagine. Sometimes the sound might be all the way to the left or to the right. Okay, often you want things straight down the middle, unless there's a real reason to be putting it to the left or the right speaker. So you generally want to try and make sure that the pan isn't set all the way to one side, because that is, yeah, it doesn't work very well. If, for example, if a singer was standing quite near to one of your PA speakers and you're getting feedback, you might actually, if they were standing near to one speaker, you might pan it slightly away from that. So you put slightly more in the other speaker, so you can keep the volume of that person up, but slightly less to that speaker, if you know what I mean. So that sometimes is a way of actually mirror imaging. If you've got a quartet, 4 singers with a PA system quite close to them, you might actually, the person who's on the right, you might give them more through the left speaker, through the main PA speaker system, so you get as much volume as possible without possibility of feeding back. But generally, 0, slap down the middle, okay, is fine. Generally, we'll set up left and right. If you had a mono PA system, as in where you didn't want any left or right, there's a mono, hence you can send a certain amount to mono, but really don't worry too much about it. Generally, we use left and right. Okay, that is all the settings there gone through. So home shows you the settings. You see there that you've got the dynamics, the compression is turned on, and you can turn these things off and on from your main here. So I could turn the different things on here. And then these ones just give you a setting. Gain, very important. Low cut if you want to be using it. Gate, if you're in a situation where you might want to use that. Drums, for example, or an acoustic instrument. Possibly you might get away with it with an acoustic guitar. If you don't want to get those kind of frequencies coming through, like little clicks and things like that, past a certain level. Compression is very useful across the board, really, but especially vocals and things like that, and drums. EQ, just individually on instruments and vocals to make them sound a little bit better. On the global EQ to potentially get rid of feedback issues. Okay. Sends depends if you are sending them to a fallback monitor or you're sending to effects. Okay, like 13, 14 here with our little bit of reverb. And main then just basically says, are you panning it left and right? Generally keep it to 0 unless you have a reason to do that. And again, knowing that effects, you can turn your reverb up or down and make it very, very echoey. So yeah, as you'll notice, I've just turned the reverb down and we're back to usual sound. So yeah, that is a second video, and that takes you through all the stuff to do with home and the config and all the kind of individual settings, which you will find at the top left of your mixer. So if we were there, you'll find it in that area of your mixer. All those settings are in that area of your mixer, and then they show up on the screen. Again, any of those view buttons will bring up that individual screen. So if you press view, then you, for example, if you press view on the dynamics, you would get the actual dynamics compression screen pop up on your screen. That's what the view does. Okay, so when I'm pressing on these little tabs, you can go on your tabs, but at the same point, actually it's better for you to just literally go and press on the view button, and it takes you to that screen. Okay, so yeah, that's the second video. Yeah, I would start trying some things out, start doing some stuff, and yeah, start trying to use this, especially compression is a useful one to use initially. So yeah, get to it, and I'll see you soon.